welcome back. Wow, we've been doing these for quite a while now. And it's a great opportunity to get to know our musicians in the San Diego Symphony Orchestra. I've enjoyed every single one of them, and I know today is no exception when we welcome Wes Precourt. Wes, welcome.
Hello, Martha. Hi, Jen.
Nice to see you. And that was beautiful. Tell us a little bit about that piece, Wes.
Let's see. So Eugene Ysaÿe was a Belgian virtuoso violinist. He is most famous for writing these 6 solo violin sonatas that he calls them etudes, but they're really concert pieces. They are all of them very interesting. The second one I thought was a fun fit. The first movement that I played, if anyone tuned in last week when Hannah played the Bach Prelude in E major, this is based off of that. So he takes the themes from that prelude. The movement is titled Obsession, which I can tell you practicing it, it becomes one. And it's this idea that you can't escape these motifs, and that at the end of these motifs, there's a release of, I guess, that pent-up frustration comes across. It's very interestingly written, where he actually has the motives are actually in small print, as though it is an actual quote. So I happen to love the piece. I've loved it for a long time. It quotes another famous thing that a lot of composers quote, the dies irae is in there. It'll come back in the second movement again. It's actually in every movement, therefore. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing, the juxtaposition of Bach with the obsessive quality, and then this sense of impending fate from the dies irae. I think it's a really inspiring and amazing piece.
Well, you played it beautifully. Thank you so much. So Wes, you are Associate Concertmaster of the San Diego Symphony Orchestra. And I think by title alone, that would be somewhat clear, but talk a little bit about the complexity of that role.
Whew, okay. I suppose there's the obvious assumption that if Jeff is not able to be playing concertmaster, that it's my duty to step into that role. But that's, in a way, a very small part, I would say, of the job, because Jeff's role is not only about just being in that chair on stage, tuning the orchestra and playing solos. There's so much more that he does. And when he's not there, or for a lot of the Pops concerts, movie concerts, and the summer when he's in the Tetons, I would have to assume those roles, which involves boeing stacks of music. I remember when we had to do the, what was the premiere of the Star Trek movie? Is that right?
Yeah, I remember that.
And I was getting, I mean, that was like this. And they were like, can you have this bowed in 24 hours? And so I was basically talking to our librarians, and I would get 3 or 4 cues, and I'd be bowing them, and then I'd email them back, and then 3 or 4 more would come in. And I mean, there's a lot of that going on behind the scenes that a lot of the, I guess, our audience might not be aware of. So I'd say the concertmaster definitely works very closely with the library, obviously very closely with the conductor, making sure that, I think a lot of the times I have guest conductors that I work with. I don't necessarily work with Raphael one-on-one like Jeff does as much. So there's a lot of making sure that the guest conductor is comfortable.
And everybody else here, Wes, or is it just me?
Am I cutting in and out?
Now you're fine.
Oh, okay. So yeah.
Me. I think it was just me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just working with guest conductors is always interesting. I have to be, I would say, quickly able to change how I respond to their physical instructions, I guess would be how to put it, because every conductor is different. And when Jeff is in that chair, I also think that, well, it is also my job to do what I can to make his life easier as well, because he's dealing with all of these things. And whether it's, can you help change a bowing over a break, and I'll go in and change bowings and the violin parts, or talk to whoever if he's engaged with Raphael or another conductor. And so it's kind of a role of many hats, where you just have to, in my opinion, be very adaptable and be able to figure out what needs to get done and get it done and pick up a lot of slack. So that's kind of how I feel. I kind of get to do a little bit of everything.
Well, and you do it so well. Let's talk about bowings for a moment. I think in a previous iteration of Lunch and Listen, we talked a little bit. It's much more than just making sure the bows are going in the same direction. It's about the quality of sound, you know, the slowness of the bow, the passage and what you're trying to say. And so you and Jeff have to be kind of in alignment as well, especially if you're stepping in, as you said.
Correct. Yeah. It's always, I would say that in my experience here, it's very rare that we've ever played a piece twice with the same bowings in total. There's obviously some passages and quick things that there's only really one way to get it done, and everybody does that. But all it takes is a little bit of a change in tempo from the conductor, especially in slow movements, when a bowing that worked no longer works. And so a lot of that is being able to change that on the fly, whether it's in the middle of playing and just swinging your bow to get the whole section to focus in and showing, okay, down, and then here we're going up, to just make something work better. Ultimately, I think the philosophy behind bowings is that the bowing has to follow the music, right? We never have music follow technique. We always have technique follow music. Mm-hmm. And we would like the bowings to be easy, as in quickly understood and quickly able to sound homogeneous. So some bowings that you might do as a soloist are not necessarily applicable when it comes to a section playing. So it's always a different kind of a thing. For instance, we just had the Beethoven concert when we had just 5 solo string instruments representing the whole orchestra. And the bowings had to be wildly different than what we did when we actually play that piece as a symphony, because some things that you can hide bow changes in a section, we couldn't. So all of a sudden it was a lot more of saving bow, not dividing chords. So a lot of chords had to be all down bow. You couldn't play up bow with divisi anymore. So it was definitely interesting to go through and kind of take a piece that we all know and rebow it for a completely different style of playing.
That is fascinating. And you referenced something I wanted to bring up, which was the concert that was streamed first on Friday, October 23rd. And I was fortunate enough to be in the recording sessions of that, sitting up in the balcony, well out of camera sight, and very, very socially distanced with a mask. But that was a real return to making music. There have been a couple of opportunities to be on the stage of the Shell, and which was great. But this was, even if it was a virtual audience, this was something being prepared to enter people's homes and to also to last for a long time. So talk about what it felt like coming back to music making in that way.
Oh, well, it had been what, almost 8 months? Is that right? About?
Wow.
It was absolutely electric, I would say. I'm lucky enough that, my wife, Hannah, is in the orchestra and we get to play together at home a lot. But I know that for a lot of people, just getting to be there with our colleagues and getting to hear like that moment when everybody plays together just the first opening of the Mozart, when we first played that, that was the first thing we did. And it was just like everything's going to be okay. I think Raphael kept saying that to us, like, this is what it's about. This is why we're all here. It was really touching. I mean, it was very emotional, I think, for a lot of people, just to know that what we love will always still be there, and we'll always find a way to be able to get together and do that. I mean, I'm just smiling thinking about the rehearsals. I mean, the concerts and the recording were in a lot of ways secondary to that feeling in the first rehearsal of, we're here, we're back, we can do this. Everybody was so happy and smiley and just sounding great and really playing with heart. Yeah.
Well, we've talked a lot about this year as a sustaining year. We actually have a sustainability fund, and people have been very generous, because it does take more to sustain the orchestra when there's no revenue. But it's so crucial to be able to, as soon as we could, to figure out a map and a way of playing together, and in this case, indoors as well as outdoors. And soon we will let everyone here in this meeting know today, because they're part of this inner circle of the family of the San Diego Symphony. But we start again next week. We continue again next week with music making, and in fact, back at Copley Symphony Hall, which we have analyzed, and it conforms to all of the safety guidelines for ventilation and so forth. Again, with a small group of musicians. I think it's 66333 strings, so 12 plus 9. We are really looking forward to continuing this work. I think it's Mozart Symphony is included in next week's program. This is sometime, of course, the orchestra plays Mozart, but not Mozart with that small of force. And in a way, as we look at this as sustainable, it's also a unique time, because an orchestra doesn't always get to play this repertoire, right?
Absolutely.
And, you know, in some ways our audiences have an expectation that if they're coming to a concert, everyone should be on the stage. But in fact, this is really important work for an orchestra to do together as well.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I think it's important in a lot of different ways. For us as string players, playing in a section is very different than what the winds have to do week after week and really be heard. For us, it's a lot more about matching, I would say, our colleagues in how we play and how we sound. And once you start paring down those numbers, it starts to shift into all of us become soloists, and we all have to lead and feel everything completely together without having any of the, are they gonna play? Are we gonna? We just have to know, and it's a really wonderful thing. I think it's something that I grew up playing in chamber orchestras actually a lot more than I did in full symphonic orchestras. For whatever reason, when I was at the USC, Thornton School of Music, I was placed in the chamber orchestra all through my undergrad. And Colburn, for the first year or so I was there, we didn't even have winds. So it was strings. I think we had like 2 horns, maybe, and 1 flute. So it really was like not, we played string heavy things, and there's so much repertoire out there that's really amazing. And I think it provides for a well-rounded experience for the orchestra as a group, and a well-rounded experience for the audience as well. Like you said, it's very easy to think that we're going to go see a concert, we're going to see 80 musicians on stage, we're going to hear Brahms. And it's a lot different to go there and hear a Mozart symphony, probably a lot closer to how it was originally played.
Right.
Small spaces with a handful of court musicians. And I think that intimacy translates to the audience. the intimacy that we end up feeling with each other on stage, the trust that we end up having to build as a small string section, really is apparent when you're sitting in the audience and when you're listening. So I'm really excited about getting to do this, and I hope that, you know, through all of this sustainability year that we're going through, I think that there's a silver lining that we're given the opportunity to be a little bit more experimental with programming. And I think that's something that will actually help the organization grow in the long term. It'll allow us to find ourselves different outlets, different venues, and different programs to reach a wider variety of audience.
We've been really fortunate because Raphael has been here in San Diego, really, except for 1 month when he went back to Europe and returned, but since March the 13th. And so his ability to be with the orchestra, including, you know, just in a Zoom meeting with the orchestra or talking to individuals as part of Listen Here, the series we were doing earlier during the summer, and talking about music with musicians, and now finally actually being able to conduct, including last week, something you didn't participate in, which was the Puccini La Boheme with San Diego Opera, and is a drive-in event. I think the importance, would be his second year as music director. Of course, his first year was cut short. We were delighted last week that we were able to announce his contract extension to 2025, 26. But his availability, his accessibility, and his ability to make music during this time, I think, is really one of the bright stars in this time we find ourselves in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I don't know, I can't say enough great things about him. He really, I think, cares about us in this community in a very deeply personal way. I know one of my favorite things that ended up happening through all this, it has nothing to do with music, but there was, I don't know if you remember that happy hour that we had about 4 months ago when it was, Raphael was there, I think you were there as well, and we all just chatted on Zoom. And that's a really wonderful thing to have that level of friendship, I would say, with the music director, that he really is one of us.
Yeah.
It's always how he's presented himself, and it's great. I mean, that's why we will always follow him, you know, we're right there. And I have some friends who played in the La Boheme, and they said that having him conduct the opera was life-changing. Even in all of this, it was just his energy that he brings. One of them said that it was the most exhausting concert they've played in so long they can't even remember. Just even with masks and distance, he pulled every ounce of energy out of the musicians. And we're lucky to have him. And I'd like to, he thinks he's lucky to be here too.
No question. And we're going to have him with us now a few more weeks. Unfortunately, Germany is shutting down more and more in terms of public spaces and concert halls. And he was scheduled to conduct there, but he'll be with us a little longer. And so we're planning more music, which is great. So you and Hannah, Hannah was on just last week. We had a lot of fun, including, as we talked earlier, a surprise question there about her young performing days. But so how do you keep going during this? I mean, okay, you're making music and you're practicing and all of that, but do you like to cook? Do you like to read? Do you like to take walks? How else do you, how do you keep your, energy?
We've actually, we just got our adult home last September, which is definitely a work in progress. So we've had that as a bit of a distraction, to say the least, as far as getting to do all these projects. That was like, oh no, we've got work, we can't do that, we can't completely disassemble an entire room of the house and repaint the walls. And now it's like, yes, you can, and you better do it. So we've had a lot of fun with that. I love to cook. Hannah is a truly stellar baker. So she got very into the whole Great British Baking Show thing.
Yeah.
So her and her mother have been watching that together, and then they will tackle recipes together over FaceTime.
Wow.
So I have been on the lucky receiving end of some pretty amazing things. I mean, she's made everything from her own recipe for a brioche that she's like tweaking other ones, and she made blueberry bagels the other week, like boiled and baked. I mean, everything. And so I'm pretty lucky with that. And then we started doing some gardening. We actually got 3 little chickens that are
Good.
pretty big, but are still freeloaders. So yeah, but just, I mean, between that and I'm lucky that my parents, I mean, I'm from San Diego, so my parents are just up the road. So we've gotten to see them a lot. Um, yeah, and other than that, I mean, trying to find musical goals, whatever those might be, whether it's just an arbitrary performance for each other that we feel like we need to do, because it's very hard to practice diligently without a reason.
Yeah,
Like
that's interesting.
when this started, it was very much like, okay, we're going to go and we're going to open up all of our old technique books and we're going to start with scales and really boring etudes. And that lasted pretty well for about a month. And then it's just not emotionally sustainable if there's no payoff. And ultimately we're performers, and not getting to perform, it's kind of like, yeah, there's no reward. So it's been, I guess, another way of trying to stay creative and decide to create rewards. I think that's the idea behind a lot of the social media projects we did, like the Vivaldi summer video and things like that, was that at least we have a date, we have a goal. So, you know, we're adapting.
I saw Jeff there and he said, I'm used to finishing a performance and having adrenaline, right? And there's this absence of that,
Yeah,
which is a lot of energy. It makes sense.
yeah. I mean, I'm I can definitely say I'm sleeping better because I'm not finishing a concert at 10 o'clock at night on a Friday, wired and unable to sleep until 1, 2 a.m. So there's that. But yeah, it was different to do the recording the other week and finish the piece and feel still very centered and not have that vibration that you have when you stand up at the end of a piece of feeling like you really ran the race. This was a lot more focused and a lot more controlled, I would say, which is by no means bad, and is, like I said, another wonderful opportunity for growth as a musician and as an artist, and really as a technician, to be able to play something of that length straight through and really focus on all of the corners rather than the performance. So it's all learning. I mean, we haven't done a lot of recording as an orchestra, and recordings tend to expose the truths you might not want to know pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's a good thing. It's a weird situation that we're in this unfortunate series of events that, in a way, will help the orchestra in a weird way as
Yeah.
a musical art.
Well, and I think it's intentional that we take this situation and make sure that we squeeze as much out of it for that goal. I think
Absolutely.
that's really critically important.
Yeah.
Because, if you were sitting at home all of this time and not getting together with colleagues, there is erosion that would occur. You were talking about perhaps kind of not going to say perfection, but the attention to details and paying attention to corners and so forth. But I did hear Raphael just before the second recording of the Beethoven Triple, I think it was the Beethoven Triple, sort of say to the orchestra, okay, perfection is fine, but let's pretend they're all out there and let's just go for it. Let's
Absolutely.
not lose the energy and the emotion of that live performance. He
Yeah.
really exhorted you to that.
No, and I totally agree that that's absolutely what we should ultimately go for. So it's that balance, you know, it's trying to find those two, because ultimately we know in the back of our minds when we make a recording, hey, this is permanent.
Right.
You know, it's not ephemeral like all music is. And I think that's why everybody gets so emotionally drawn to live performances, because we know this is the only time we'll hear this.
Yeah.
The only time we'll hear that turn of phrase like that. But when you make a recording, you really want to let go, but in the back of your mind, you're always thinking, well, it better sound good because everyone's going to hear this for a while.
No, that's true. That's great.
Yeah.
You spend a lot of time every summer at the summer site. You're a concertmaster for many of the 10 weeks out there.
Yes.
And you play a huge range of repertoire, but you've also had the opportunity now to sit on the new stage of the show.
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about the difference.
I mean, it's the same view towards Point Loma, and that's really the only similarity. It sounds like a hall. I don't know how else to put it. The first time that we had our little informal reading and I ran out into the stands to listen, and I was just floored by the fact that it sounded like a hall. Like we might as well have been indoors in a great concert hall. I could hear everyone. There was maybe 12 people when we were reading that Mozart, maybe 15. And it sounded like a full orchestra. And half of the, actually, I don't think any of the sound reflectors were up. It
Yeah.
was just the actual shell. And it's phenomenal. It's like we are so lucky to be an orchestra that has something like this going on. And I really do think that it's going to be the venue in the country that other orchestras are going to want to come to, that other performing acts are going to want to come to. It is going to be iconic in this city, like the Sydney Opera House, like that level of, oh, let's take a picture of the San Diego coastline and make it onto a t-shirt and the shell will be there. Like, it's amazing. And I cannot thank you and your team enough for this. This is growing up here, having something like this is something I never would have thought would be San Diego. When I grew up, San Diego was, I mean, we didn't really have the culture that's going on right now, like this exploding music scene in this town. It's wonderful.
You know, you can do television. That was just a great commercial. We're going to use that again, Wes. No, we're very excited. And of course, the most essential thing, we know we've got great amenities with, you know, enhanced food. And I will tell you, the lighting looks amazing. We've been out there the last couple of nights, just as soon as it gets dark and they're starting to fire up the lighting on the shell. It's just in its infancy compared to what we're going to be able to do. All of that is great. And the lawn looks beautiful. The artificial turf is in and the sight lines are great. All of that's great. But the most essential thing is how you feel on that stage and how you sound on that stage. And I agree with you. It fulfills and exceeds all of our expectations. So we're excited about that. But importantly, it's great for me to hear you say that.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably the first time I've been there playing and able to hear the other side of the stage.
And you're distanced by 10 and 12 feet. Just imagine.
Yeah.
And you have 70 musicians on there close together. It'll be amazing.
It's going to be, I mean, it's going to be like playing in a hall. It's not going to be a summer site. It's going to be our other hall.
It's very exciting. I think you have one more piece for us. What, can you introduce that to us for us?
Okay, so this is the second movement of the Ysaÿe sonata. It's feel bad saying this. It's called Melancholia. It's not a happy movement, but it's not altogether unhappy. It's blue. There's a full quote of the Dies Irae at the end in the actual modal harmonies. And I think it's a really, really beautiful piece. It relies heavily on a lot of intonation work, which presents a lot of challenges that I hope I succeeded at. And yeah, I would highly recommend anyone who's listening to this to then go out and find the third and fourth movements and continue listening to the Uzai today. It's a pretty incredible work that he managed to write.
Thank you so much for being here today, but also just you're a wonderful spirit in this orchestra and a wonderful performer. We're really happy that you are here.
Thank you. I am too. I couldn't possibly be happier.